Okay. Well, thank you all so much for joining. My name's Allee Olive. I'm one of the North Carolina co-chairs for the SACAC State and Area Initiatives Committee. I see some familiar faces and names. I work at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in the undergraduate admissions office. This is my 8th admission cycle with UNC. And we're so glad to have all of you here. I will share my screen and share some slides for everybody. Hopefully everyone can see. Does it look like a PowerPoint? Can I get a nod? Yeah. Thank you. We're years into this, but still take some practice. So I am joined by my colleague, Renee, who will introduce herself in a minute, but really we're here to help members better connect with each other locally and with the association. And this is really to offer networking, opportunities to learn more, professional development for people working on the admissions side as college and school counseling professionals, regardless of SACAC membership. So hopefully you can learn a little bit and see if you want to engage further. So I'm going to now turn it over to Renee to introduce herself.
Thank you, Allie. Welcome to everyone. I'm Renee Ferrerio, and I am the Director of College Counseling at the O'Neill School in Southern Pines, North Carolina. I also work for the College Essay Guy as a college counselor, so I kind of wear 2 hats, I guess. And we're really, really happy that so many people have turned out, especially I saw there was a lot of public school counselors who signed up. And I was really thrilled to see that kind of at the last second. I know one of my colleagues sent out a notice to everybody that attended the CACRO fairs this year. So we got a large amount of public school counselors on here. But before we start getting into the committee updates and everything, I'd like to basically talk about what is SACAC. So I don't know if you want to go to the next screen. There's our information. So this is our organization is it's the mission of SACAC is to foster a collaborative and inclusive network of college admissions professionals by promoting ethical responsibility, professional growth, student access, advocacy, and outreach, thus equipping and supporting professionals to help all students realize their post-secondary educational goals. So our goal is really to connect the high school side counselors, which includes public school counselors, private school counselors, IECs, CBOs, or anybody else on the high school side, to connect them with counselors and admissions professionals on the post-secondary side. And our main mission is really to help high school students get into college. Our State and Area Initiatives Committee holds 2 meetings a year. This is the first one. This is our virtual meeting, and it's open to anyone who wants to attend. You don't have to be a member to attend this one. Our spring meeting will be held at our face-to-face at our annual conference in Jacksonville this year, which is going to be from April 23rd to the 25th. There'll be more information about that in a minute. We have a lot of different committees, and we're going to highlight several of them today. And if you're new to SACAC or you're not a member yet, you can go into the website and look at what each of these committees does. But we're going to go through some updates with each committee. And I'd like to introduce our first guest speaker is Courtney Vaughn. She's the co-chair of the Professional Development Committee. She's going to give some updates there. So take it away, Courtney.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Allie and Renee, for leading North Carolina. I'm a previous member of the North Carolina state meetings and such, so it's good to see you all again. I want to give a couple of updates because we've got a lot of PD activities going on, and we finally got things back in person this past year. For those of you that are new or nearly new professionals, or if you have hired new or nearly new professionals, and if you're not familiar, we have 2 really fabulous professional development events. These QR codes will take you directly to the SACAC website. Summer Seminar is for new or new to the high school side of the desk. It's a 4-day workshop. It'll be over at UNC Charlotte this year. And we spend a couple of days just getting people ready for the high school side, rec writing, developing relationships with your students, connecting in a school community, etc. That'll be in the middle of July next summer. Conversely, on the other side of the desk, on the college side, dry run is for new and really new to the working world professionals to college admissions. Also a 4-day workshop where they are being mentored by more seasoned professionals. We will be at the College of Charleston this year at the end of July. Then we have a few other programs also with QR codes in case you want to check out the website. But the Sweet Tea Tour is an opportunity for college counselors, and we have them from all over the country, not just the Southern region, but we highlight a specific area or state within the South and travel around for 5 to 7 days. This year, we will be touring Tennessee, going from the west to the east side. We're putting together that route right now, but it'll be inclusive of big schools, small schools, medium schools, HBCUs, PWIs, etc. So really excited for that tour coming up. We haven't been to Tennessee in a while, so excited to get back. And then finally, SACAC Leads. Many of you, or all of you, if you're a SACAC member, received an email yesterday about Leads. The application for this program is open now for participants and faculty. This is an opportunity, really, if you are in the middle and you're like, I want to do more, but I don't know what more to do, and I want to be able to be involved in bigger conversations within higher education, admissions, and college counseling. So we've got space for participants and then also faculty, really for folks in that participants in that like 5, 7, 10 year, and then for faculty that 10, 15 plus year. That application is open. Again, you should have gotten an email in your inbox from Diana yesterday. My apologies that I have to scoot very quickly off of here, but yay, North Carolina. It's great to see everybody, and I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks, Allee and Renee, for space this morning.
Thank you, Courtney. Really appreciate it.
And I should I was just going to say, I should have mentioned at the beginning, if you have questions for any of our presenters, go ahead and put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat so we can answer any of those questions. Go ahead, Renee. Great.
Thank you, Allee. Next, I want to introduce Christine Grover. She's the co-chair of the SACAC National College Fair Committee. Christine, it's yours.
Thank you so much. It's great to see everybody. So Jessica Hardy couldn't join us today, but I wanted to tell you what's coming up with NACAC fairs in the area. So that March 19th is the one that's happening in Charlotte, and we're just starting conversations. Please go ahead and sign up for those, and I should have put that link in there. I can put it in the chat. It's nacacattend.org/fairs. So I'll write that in the chat. If you cannot attend that one in person, they are each month going to have virtual fairs that the students can go to as well. So just let me know if you have any questions, and we're excited for that one coming up.
Thank you, Christine. Justine, next up is Justine of the Grants and Fiscal Oversight Committee. Is Justine on?
Hi, I'm here.
Hi, Justine. Hi. Hi.
Thank you so much for having us. I currently work at East Carolina University, but Myra is here as well. So we are so excited to be here.
Hi, hello, I'm Myra Simpson. Greetings from St. Petersburg. I work at Shorecrest Preparatory School in St. Petersburg. And so the two of us are the co-chairs of the Grants and Fiscal Oversight, where we have the opportunity to work with SACAC members and to help them identify programs and opportunities to pursue professional development and support programs as they're working with students. So we wanted to take a few moments to talk about the two programs. I'll start with the Council Participation Fund, and then I'll turn it over to Justine to talk about the Extending the Dream. So our colleague, board colleague Courtney just talked to you about some of the professional development programs that SACAC offers for its members. So we, as the Council Participation Fund, some of you may have had experiences with CPF before where you've either applied or been a past recipient. The Council Participation Fund is for SACAC members to support their attendance at SACAC professional development events. So if you are interested in going to the SACAC conference, the summer seminar, Sweet Tea Tour, dry run, this is a fund to provide you monies to help you pay for your registration, your travel costs to attend these programs. So we are excited to let you know that the application is now available. You might have gotten an email in your inboxes last week with the letting you know the application has been launched. A couple things we wanted to make you aware of. In the past years, if you've applied for the CPF grant, the application window typically opened in November and the deadline was till February. We did shift that a little bit this year, so the deadline is actually earlier. It's January 10th. The reason why we did that is that we know that the SACAC registration for the conference will open in January. And so we wanted to make sure that that CPF applicants were in a position, once they heard from regarding the status of their application, that they could, as soon as they knew whether or not they were getting a CPF grant, they could take advantage of the early bird window, secure housing for the conference. So just be aware that that is a change this year. Like normally it was February, the deadline is January. We typically will notify applicants now. This year we'll notify them in January. And if you are interested in applying, please make sure to get your application in. We're really excited to review applicants. It's always a great joy for us to be able to review applications and then send good news out to people about their status.
Okay, so also we spent a lot of time this summer kind of reflecting on SACAC's mission and thinking about what our money and what the grant should really be going to. And another really exciting opportunity is, of course, the Extending the Dream grant, where we're able to kind of produce some funds to help you bring back projects for your students. So we will be sending out some more details about the timeline. But again, you can look for that, probably some announcements in February or March about the application being live, and then the deadline in April for that deadline to be completely done. And at that point, again, it's really great to be thinking about that now, so that when those applications come available, you are ready to start kind of submitting those projects and ideas.
Thank you so much, Myra and Justine. I appreciate that. I think next we have Lucy Smith for the Inclusion and Access Committee.
Yes, hi. Thank you so
Hi,
much.
Lucy.
Hi, Renee. Good to see you.
You too.
Thank you to everybody who is here for this meeting. I am Lucy Smith, and my co-chair is Juan Acosta, who is at the Westminster School in Atlanta, Georgia. So we have a few exciting things going on in within our committee. So Inclusion, Access, and Success, we are working to create just that within higher education and also within our high school environments as well. So one of the things that we are doing is continuing the work of college admission workshops. Because of COVID, they were only online, and this year we're doing both. We're doing online and returning to in-person programs. So hopefully you've been getting those emails about the online workshops that have been going on throughout this first semester, and we'll have more to come in the second semester as well, on a variety of topics. And those recordings are on the SACAC website as well. So you're welcome to go back and view those or share them with your families as it applies. So the college admission workshop that will be in person in North Carolina is going to be in Charlotte. Haley Cripps is going to be our site coordinator for that. So she's going to be running the show, but with some great support. I know she's already been working on trying to identify some people to work with, and also locations and dates. But we need volunteers. So if you'd like to help with check-in or presenting or anything else that we might need that day, please sign up. That QR code will take you to our sign up Google form so that you can add your name to the list, and I can share that with Haley. The other thing we've been working on is our outreach project. That was another COVID casualty that is coming back. And we're really, really excited. So our annual conference is in Jacksonville, Florida this year, or this school year in April. And so we're asking you to save the date for Saturday, April 22nd, the day before the conference officially starts. That morning, we're going to be hosting a program. We're still working through the logistics of it, but right now our goal is to address both families and public school counselors in that area, primarily public school counselors, but we're not going to close the door in anybody's faces. So we'll be inclusive with that as well. But to offer some professional development for counselors, as well as college counseling resources and information for families in the Jacksonville community. So please save the date. We'll send out more information as we have it, to have people to sign up to volunteer. So we're really excited about that.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you
Sure.
so
And can I add
much.
one more thing?
Yeah, of course.
I know that, with the sorry, my brain just went dead. With the NACAC fairs and in Charlotte, I serve on that committee for the regional. So for the planning committee for NACAC, I'm going to piggyback off of Christine's comments. So we're excited to be planning that in person again. And so for those of you who have volunteered before or might want to volunteer now, whether it's in the advising center or we offer like some workshops as well at the fair. Reach out, let me know, and I can help get you connected in a volunteer role.
Great. Thank you so much.
There
I think
were a few questions in the chat. One was about sharing the slides after the webinar. We are recording this, but yes, I think we can share this with anybody who attended. And somebody wanted to see this QR code, I think. And then, yeah, I think a few helpful links have been shared in the chat as well.
thanks, Allie. All right. I think up next is Shannon Barrilleaux, of the Member Relations Committee.
Hi there.
Hey, Shannon.
How are you?
Great.
I'm Shannon Ferrerio. I am currently I'm sitting at the Reagan National Airport, coming home from the George Mason fly-in. I was with Renee on that this weekend. And I'm heading to New Orleans, where I work at Metairie Park Country Day School. And I am on the Member Relations Committee with Brent Shropshire also, who's not able to be with us today. And Member Relations, we're in your emails a lot. Our names are on all the kind of SACAC emails, but we oversee the SIG programming, the mentorship programming, the volunteer coordinators, and all things membership related. And so if you have any questions about membership, feel free to pop in our inboxes at any point to ask questions or see how you can get more involved. We're happy to chat that out. Sorry if it's a little bit loud in here. So the two things that I did want to talk about was just joining. If you haven't renewed your membership yet, the membership cycle is running now from September 1st to August 31st. It's $45. It's really easy to find on the website. Currently, North Carolina, of all the states that we represent in SACAC, is the third largest in membership. Currently, you have 225 members from North Carolina. And I'm happy to say that 46 of those members are public school counselors. It's approximately 20% of your membership right now. We launched last year in January the free access membership that allows anyone in our region to become a member for free if they work at a public high school as a public high school college access counselor or in any sort of advising and college support role, and as well as community-based organizations whose primary function is college access counseling. And so it's a little bit tricky with the language, because if you see nonprofit, I know a lot of our schools, even my independent school, is a 501c3 nonprofit for certain things. And unfortunately, you will not qualify unless you are at a public high school. Public charters, if you're unable to afford the fee, we have waived it at times. There are some highly funded public charter schools and public high schools. So the mission, the intention of the program is to really support schools that are under-resourced and counselors who are under-resourced to be part of the program. We have a site, a part of our website devoted to free access membership. It has resources that's kind of a grassroots effort. And so I would love if anyone has resources that could be added and modified to be uploaded to that section of the website. We'd welcome anything that you think might be a good resource for all counselors, but in particular counselors that might have fewer access to fewer resources. I think that's all I have to talk about for membership, but yeah, reach out if you need anything.
Thank you, Shannon. Appreciate that. Up next is Deb Ryan for the SACAC North Carolina Government Relations.
Hi, thank you, Renee. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. I am an IEC. I'm located in Little Washington, North Carolina. I'm about 25 minutes east of ECU, and I'm also the college advisor for a small private Christian school out here in Little Washington. Jane Ann, I'm not sure if Jane Ann is, I don't think she's on the call today, but she is my co-chair for government relations. And this is actually going to be my last year in the role. So if anyone is interested in doing advocacy work, please reach out to me. I would also just say, before we go to the next slide to talk about our December meeting, if you are thinking about joining SACAC, please do. It's my favorite organization. I belong to lots of organizations. It's my favorite one that I belong to. And getting engaged it can be a little engagement or a big engagement, but it's definitely really, I think, all about being student-centered and being servant leaders. And I just think it's a really extraordinary organization. So I hope that people will feel like they can be, a part of the organization and volunteer in whatever capacity makes sense for them, because it's really, you meet wonderful people. So anyway, that's my little spiel about SACAC. We hope that people will join us for our government relations virtual session. It's December 8th, and I'm putting the link to register in the chat. We have a pretty amazing group of panelists that are going to be speaking to us about kind of a lot of things that are happening right now that are particularly relevant to North Carolina. So Matt Ellenwood, who's at the NC Justice Center, has been very involved with both the SCOTUS race-conscious admissions case and with Leandro. So Leandro case is about funding for K through 12, but I think it actually has really important ramifications for us to understand what's happening in our school systems as students are coming to us in higher education in North Carolina. David Hinojosa spoke on behalf of UNC in the SCOTUS case. So of course that decision won't come down until next year, but I think it'll be really tremendous to get his insights on sort of what's happening with that and the potential outcomes. Bob Schaefer is a wonderful human being. He is going to be speaking to us from Fair Test on other ways that institutions can break down systemic barriers to access to higher education through policies, if the SCOTUS decision goes the way that I think a lot of people expect it to go. And then David Hawkins, of course, is our superstar. He is the Chief Education and Policy Officer, and he's going to lead us off during our session just to talk about sort of post-midterm elections and, the broader sort of global view about what's happening with policy and potentially what is going to come down the pike next year. So we're hoping that it's going to be a really informative meeting, definitely a chance for people to ask questions as well. Yes, there will be a recording available for the GovRel session. We always record those because I think this is going to be really important information for people to understand what's happening both in our state and sort of in the United States overall in higher education. There's some really big decisions that are going to be making, I think, some pretty tremendous impacts. So very grateful for these gentlemen to be joining us for this panel. We're also hoping to do something in the spring. We haven't decided yet if that's going to be in person or centered around the college fair, or if we're going to do another virtual advocacy day. Unfortunately, NACAC has canceled for now their day on the Hill, which is kind of disappointing because that would be a great chance for us to all sort of go to Washington and engage with advocacy. But we're sort of still in the planning stages for our spring meeting, but we'll hope you'll join us for the December meeting. And if you have questions at all about government relations, about volunteering, I also co-chair one of the special interest groups, and I have done the workshops for the college workshops before. They're wonderful. Please don't hesitate to reach out and ask me questions. So,
thank you so much, Deb. Appreciate that. Our last committee update is going to be done by Katherine Chastain of the Admissions Practices Committee. I think I saw Katherine come on, so.
Yeah, good morning.
Hi,
I'm so
Katherine.
sorry, guys. RSV is real and it has started to hit our office. So we had to play some juggling this morning, but thank you for allowing me to join you guys a little late. I am representing the Admissions Practices Committee for the SACAC board, and I have an amazing co-chair who does hail from North Carolina, Sean Kennedy. And I am just joining today to give a little bit of an update to the Guide to Ethical Practices in College Admissions. This is just a look backwards at where kind of we got to where we are today, as well as a look forward with some exciting news from National AP Committee and those sorts of things. So just as a reminder, I'm sure that a lot of people are very aware, but who is NACAC? NACAC was founded in 1937, and the whole purpose of NACAC is to serve as an organization that serves students that are pursuing college, as well as those of us that work in this world of college admissions and recruitment. NACAC is officially the largest trade organization that focuses on college admissions, and SACAC is an affiliate of NACAC. So 80 years, and through those 80 years history, we have focused on speaking on behalf of ethical practices in the world of admissions. Well, for years and years, we had a number of different documents that guided our ethical practices. For quite some time, we functioned off of the SPGP, because we love a good acronym in higher ed. And the SPGP served as a core document to help us guide recommendations and ethical practices. Well, in 2017, that document saw a really big overhaul. It was honestly the biggest overhaul that that document had seen in more than 10 years. And at that point in time, we changed the name of the document from the SPGP to the CEPP, because again, acronyms. And that stood for the Code of Ethics and Professional Practices. The difference in this document and every other document that NACAC had ever had was that this document provided clear ethical practices and rules that were required for members to follow. This was done in an issue to ensure protection from our students, from unethical practices. And in this new iteration, everything was mandated. But that resulted in almost an immediate inquiry from the Department of Justice around concerns of antitrust elements, specifically related to some components that were in the document that were connected to recruiting transfer students, incentives for early decision, and then the actively recruiting freshmen after May 1st. Well, in response to the DOJ investigation, the NACAC Assembly voted to place a moratorium on enforcing anything. And then through this investigation, we ultimately made the decision based off of our counsel and legal counsel recommendations that we would remove those three components from our code of ethics and then continue to place a moratorium on the CEPP. Finally, we can fast forward to after there was a consent decree. Basically, the Department of Justice said, thank you, you have done the correct thing. We went through our public comment period. And in 2020, our NACAC board approved a motion to recast the CEPP. And in September of 2020, the NACAC delegation voted to replace the CEPP with the new guide. Now, the guide, they've also used an acronym. They are calling it GEPCA, but we are trying very hard to just stop with the acronyms at this point in time. And we're just going to call this one the guide. Okay. And then very exciting, in December of 2021, the National AP Committee formed. And throughout NACAC's history, AP, Admissions Practices Committee, was always kind of the body of people that if you went to them, you were in trouble, and we're going to talk about it and that kind of a thing. And now AP has shifted, and we are serving as a more educational body and a body of our members that can help our NACAC organization and SACAC organization understand what are ethical practices, and kind of where do we go from here. So we can scoot forward a slide. So how is the guide similar to the CEPP and the SPGP and everything that was before then? Well, number one, the priority is serving the best interest of our students, and that is there in the guide. Number two, it does maintain that formally mandated practices are now recommended practices. And so all of those practices are still there as recommendations. We are just no longer able to enforce anything. We recommend them. And we recommend continuously that the earliest deadlines are October 15th and that there is a May 1st deadline for everyone. Now, how is it different? So everything that was required is now only recommended. We simply recommend things as best practices. We no longer enforce anything. NACAC cannot enforce anyone's practices. AP committees can't enforce anything. And our recommended practices are less specific. We have updated our core values, again, to better serve our students. And throughout the guide, there are embedded links that take you to resources that support recommended practices. And again, there are no sanctions for non-compliance. We can move forward. So I just want to read this. The Department of Justice investigation into NACAC's Code of Ethics on restraint of trade grounds has resulted in an irreversible change in the direction for NACAC. That was written by our ad hoc committee report on leadership in college admissions. And much as Deb was talking about earlier with kind of our world and what is government relations right now, just a lot is changing in college admissions. But I encourage everyone to stay focused on the purpose of the guide, which is to allow us to serve our students in the best ways that we possibly can. And the guide's pillars are advocacy, education, and communication, just like NACAC. We can move forward. So some updates, like what's coming from NACAC and what's coming from our awesome National AP Committee. So number one, the guide is going to continue to be updated. And so we are going to receive more and more educational materials that are included with the guide that allow us to better understand how to practice college admissions and recruitment ethically. Another thing that's kind of coming out of that is ethical dilemmas. Major shout out to the prior AP committee chairs. Sean and I walked in and the NACAC National Committee kept saying, so we're going to take the SACAC plan. And Sean and I were like, yeah, the SACAC plan, that sounds great. So the prior committee chairs had put together some ethical dilemmas that are available on the SACAC website, and they are now using them at a national level to help people understand these are hypothetical situations. If this is happening, what is an ethical way that we can find solutions to these things? A much more positive look, and know that NACAC is going to continue to update those. And they are also, when we meet as AP groups, we are discussing how can the Admissions Practices Committee do a better job of educating and do more things like today, which talking to state committees and those sorts of things. And they are also putting together the NACAC form. And so know that if you go on to the AP website and the Guide to Ethical Practices in College Admissions, the guide website, you're going to see a form link. If you have questions regarding a situation, if you have your own ethical dilemma, if you just want to learn more, that form is a great way that you can go in and say, hello, this is happening, and I just wanted to know if we have an example of maybe how I could handle this situation or where my best direction should be when it comes to making sure I'm practicing admissions ethically. And so know that that NACAC form is now available, which is exciting. Also know that you can always check out the AP website on SACAC's website. It has our common dilemmas. And if you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Sean and I. That's our SACAC email, admissionspractices@sacac.org. We are not promising that we will have an answer, but we promise that we will do our best to help you navigate this new world that we are in with the guide. But know that Sean and I are very hopeful for what the role of admissions practices can continue to be, and how we can continue to advocate for all of us that work in this field on how to practice admissions and recruitment ethically. So thank you all for letting me join today.
Thank you, Katherine. That was great. Thank you so much. There's one last update that I'd like to give. I just wanted to give I guess a shout out to the mentorship program, which is the next slide here. This is my 7th year as the director of college counseling at the O'Neill School. But prior to this, I spent 20 years in Fulton County in Atlanta as a public school counselor. And I did go speak at one of the CACRO meetings this year and there's a lot of public school counselors there, just to say that, first of all, SACAC was an amazing resource as a public school counselor. I'm really, really glad that it's free now for public school counselors to join, because it is really hard to get the funding to do a lot of this stuff. But one of the first things I did when I became the director of college counseling was I signed up for the mentorship program, because even though I had 20 years of experience in college counseling, for those of you who've been on both sides, which I know it's not a very common thing, but if you were a public school counselor and then you became a private school counselor, the completely different jobs. So this was really helpful for me. I signed up and was paired up with someone who was a veteran director of college counseling and was able to meet with them and use them as my go-to person with all the questions that I had as I was building a program here at O'Neill. So this can be found on the website. There's 3 committee chairs: Kayla Brown, Allee Pearson, and Evan Sprinkle. So any of those people you could, I'm sure, reach out to with questions, but there's a questionnaire. You would fill that out and they would pair you up with somebody. So you don't have to be brand new to the profession. You just have to probably be new to your position, and you can get some help and support with that. So I really think that was a great thing that I experienced 7 years ago. Just wanted to mention it. And also just want to mention, for those of you, I know we mentioned it a few slides back, but signing up for the SACAC conference, for those of you who have never been, it's a great way to connect and network with your colleagues, and also a great space to learn. You can pick the sessions that you want to attend, and you will come out of it with a whole, you'll be inspired by the time you leave. So hopefully a lot of you can do that. So I would like to switch over and introduce our guest speakers for today. I'm probably going to embarrass them a little bit, but we are really, I feel lucky to have Andrew Belasco, who's the CEO of College Transitions, and Michael Trivette, who's the Director of Operations at College Transitions. These guys they're amazing people. They are brilliant. They know a lot about a lot of things. They're pretty humble, so that's probably why I'm going to embarrass them. But they're also very generous with their data and things that they're going to share with you in a moment. But they're also good friends of mine, and they go way back to my Atlanta days. There's a long story involved, but we've been friends for quite a while now. So I'm gonna introduce Andrew and Michael, and I'm gonna read a little bit of their bios. That's the part that's probably going to embarrass them. But first, about Andrew, he is a licensed counselor and independent educational consultant. Andrew's experience in the field of college admissions and transition spans nearly 15 years. After receiving a BA from Georgetown University and a Master's of Education from Harvard University's Graduate School of Education, Andrew earned a PhD at the University of Georgia's Institute of Higher Ed, where his research focused on college access and institutional admission policies. He's published in education's top academic journals, including Education Evaluation and Policy Analysis, Research in Higher Ed, and the Journal of Higher Ed, among others. And his research and commentary have been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Forbes, CBS Money Watch, U.S. News and World Report, Inside Higher Ed, the Chronicle of Higher Ed, NPR, and more than a dozen other media outlets. Andrew is also the co-author of The Enlightened College Applicant, a new approach to the search and admissions process, and Colleges Worth Your Money, a guide to what America's top colleges can do for you. Prior to launching College Transitions, Andrew worked as a school counselor at Abington Senior High School in suburban Philadelphia, a college admissions consultant, and a blogger for Kaplan Test Prep, and as a research consultant at the federal level for the Congressional Advisory Committee on Student Financial Assistance. So he has done a lot, and I am going to also introduce Michael and read a little bit about him. Michael earned a PhD from the Institute of Higher Ed at UGA. Michael has over a decade of experience in the higher ed field, ranging from college admissions, enrollment management, intercollegiate athletics, student support services, student life, and other areas. A published researcher, Michael's research centers on post-secondary student access issues. His dissertation work involves state and national level policies as it relates to college access for undocumented students, and his work is funded in part by the American Educational Research Association. His research has been published in Educational Policy, Review of Higher Education, the Journal of Higher Ed, and the Journal of Education Finance. Michael also holds a credential in college admissions counseling from University of California, San Diego. He's a member of NACAC. And before joining the Institute of Higher Ed, Michael worked in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions at App State. His primary responsibilities included developing recruiting materials and messaging content for specific target markets and student populations, and working with admissions counselors to ensure that Appalachian was at the forefront of public higher education in North Carolina and the Southeast US. While at Appalachian, Michael also taught courses as an adjunct faculty member in 3 departments. So that's a lot. Andrew and Michael are here to talk about the latest trends in the college admissions process and to share some excellent resources that will hopefully make your job a bit easier. And if you have any questions, make sure to put them in the chat. So welcome, Michael and Andrew. I turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for the warm introduction, Renee. And a lot of that stuff that you just mentioned, it sounds really cool, but man, some of it's so boring, but it's still pretty cool to think back about. Yeah, so what we thought we would do today is just kind of run you through some of the data that we commonly use and some of the sources that are like our go-to sources. Now, a lot of this information for many of you may be somewhat redundant, but we're hoping that we can also provide some information on maybe some things that you haven't used in the past, and then some of the trends that we've noticed in college admissions over the course of the last 5 or 10 years. And as you know, college admissions has changed considerably over the last few, especially in relation to COVID. So we're going to touch upon that a bit too. And then finally, we thought, instead of just talking at you the entire time, we really want to have a conversation with you guys, because quite honestly, some of the best ideas we've received over the last few years have been from having conversations with counselors like yourself, both at the post-secondary, college side of things, but also inside of high schools. So yeah, we want to really open the floor and just kind of take a Q&A and have a conversation that way. So if you want to advance the slide, and I'll kind of run you through some of the main data sources that we use. That does include Common Data Set, College Data, which is a fantastic website. It's free. College Board is also free. US News. You do have to have a paid subscription to get certain restricted data, but there is some information that's readily available for free as well. IPEDS, which is ran by the federal government. It's the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System or data set. It's a free website to use, but it's a bit tricky to navigate at times. So we'll kind of share our screen a little bit, show you just a little bit of that, and then we'll walk through our College Transitions Dataverse. It's a site that is on our website. It's a page on our website, but it has a multitude of different data tables, list information that's free for you and will stay free. And then we're constantly kind of building to that and adding to that. And we'll also show you a tool that we recently developed over the last year that I think could be somewhat helpful as well. And then finally, after that, we'll cover some of those admission trends, talking about early admission, test optional admissions, competitive admissions at top institutions, and then major choice and the impact on college admissions that can have. And then we're actually going to add a little bit of information about what we've noticed concerning wait lists, and then international standards for, admission standards for international applicants, and how we noticed that's changed over the last couple of years as well. So I'm actually going to share my screen with you just briefly.
1 second. Let me.
Yeah.
Sorry, we just switched it. Okay, you should be good now.
All right. And if my computer sometimes is a bit slow to start with this, but once we get it going, it'll go okay. Just bear with me 1 second. All right, so hopefully you can see Davidson College's website. What I did initially is if you want to find a common data set for any institution, just Google the name of the institution, common data set, it should pull it up. Now, you will maybe notice some cases where you're trying to find a CDS, often referred to as CDS, for a certain school, maybe you can't find it. There's a really good chance that it could be buried on the institutional research website, or the institution has just decided, somewhat controversially, that maybe they're not going to post it. We've actually worked with some columnists recently, one in particular, New York Times, to kind of put pressure on institutions to publish this data, and he's been somewhat successful. And actually, there's been a lot of colleges that used to prohibit, posting this data. They're now starting to come out with it, but the overwhelming majority of institutions out there will post their common data set on their website. As you'll see on Davidson's website, they have the most recent year of CDS data. Some institutions will go back as far as 20 years, and you can actually compare, data from 2005 to data from the most recent academic year. We're actually going to create a repository on our website probably within the next year, and we're going to try to house the last 5 years of CDS data for approximately 300 plus institutions. And we hope to grow that over time. But as you can imagine, it's quite a bit of an effort to try to collect that data and post it to our site. It takes up a tremendous amount of space. So we're going to work on that. But we're hoping that a year from now at this time, that should be available. And we'll make it pretty clear where you can find it on our site. But for now, if I go to Davidson College's CDS and I click that, I'm going to bring up this PDF form. This may look somewhat familiar if you've seen it before, but there's a lot of information here. There's various sections. So there's kind of a general information section. And if I go through in section B, I start to get into some enrollment information, as I can see here. Sorry, I skipped ahead. And then the information that we commonly use starts really in section C. And this is admission for first year applicants. Okay, so we can see the number of applicants who have applied, credits that are often required, factors that go into the admissions process, like is a student an alum, have an alumni relation? Do they demonstrate interest? Are they first generation? We can see how those institutions categorize those different variables. We can also see SAT, ACT policies, as we'll talk about in a moment with test optional admissions. As you know, many schools are test optional now and for the foreseeable future, but that information should be logged there as well. And then we start to get in some of the other admissions information like test scores, whether or not a school offers early decision admission policies. There's just a lot of good information that's available on these CDS pages. And again, it's easy to pull up, pretty free. If you're not familiar with it, we do encourage you to just kind of pour through a CDS just to see all the information and data that's there. You'll see programs that are offered by schools, the percentage of degrees that are conferred by institutions in those various fields, faculty breakdown in terms of full-time versus part-time faculty, average class size, cost. There's just everything that you could possibly want really is typically provided in the CDS, and they tend to add some data every now and then too. So that's a great place to start.
If you want the most recent admissions related data, the CDS is usually the best place to go. A lot of these secondary data sites like Peterson's, College Board, Futures, they don't post prior year data usually until October or November of year, whereas a lot of these colleges will post their CDS 6 months before or even 9 months before. So if you really need most recent year data right away, as Michael said, the best thing to do is to Google an institution's name and the term CDS. That should take you to the place where you need to be.
Yeah, definitely. All right, and then College Data is another great free site. If you guys, when you go to like NACAC, National Conference, you typically see a booth there for College Data. We're big proponents of what they've done over the last 2 years of making this stuff readily available for students. They've reformatted the site, looks like in the past year or so, but it's still pretty easy to navigate. And a lot of that same information that you see in like a CDS, you'll see it here as well. And so if I scroll down again, I can see those factors just presented in sort of a different view. That may be pretty easy to digest. Also admissions information there as well, test score averages, et cetera. So a lot of the same information. As Andrew mentioned, sometimes you can notice small discrepancies between like a CDS and another website like a College Data or College Board, big future site, just because if a CDS does have that most recent year data, there may be a slight lag there for some of these websites. So I'll switch over now to Big Future. They have definitely revamped this site over the last year. But again, a lot of that same information there. So if you just Google College Board Big Future, name of the college, it'll typically bring up the college profile, and you can find a lot of the information that you would want to find in a CBS file as well. And then finally, US News, which can be a good source of information as well. A lot of free information, but if you do want some of the more granular data that is a little bit harder to find, you will have to have a paid membership. I think an annual fee there is maybe like 30 to 50 bucks, something like that. All right, and then iPads, the last one I wanted to show you. This is through the National Center of Education Statistics. We used it quite extensively during our graduate work at UGA. But where I tend to go whenever I come here is I just Google iPads data center, and it'll bring me here. And I typically go through the compare institutions route. You can also click survey data and then custom data files, and it's going to bring you to a page that's very similar to this. And so I added Davidson College. I can also look up any other institution in the country. So let's say I wanted to add, Elon University. We're big fans of Elon too. And if I select that, I should now see Davidson and Elon. And as you can see, the ID number is the iPads number. That's a specific institutional number that's assigned to every college in the country. This includes 4-year institutions, private, public, 2-year institutions as well. So you can find data on any school in the country by going to add iPads. Now, there is going to be more of a lag in iPads. That's the thing that we should note. So as Andrew mentioned, the CDS is going to give you the most up-to-date, most recent year data, but there is sometimes a bit of a longer lag with iPads because of data reporting mechanisms. So you can go in here, you can add your institutions, you can select variables through all the different types of admission variables and other variables that you would want to know about an institution outside of admissions. So graduation rates, outcomes, student financial aid, institutional characteristics, including like the town that it's located, the state, the size of the institution, all different types of things that you would want to know. And you can go back so many different years. So you can actually create almost like panel data and kind of see this, how it changes over time for different institutions.
Yeah, this is one of the few places you can actually go for historical data. Most other websites just publish current year data. So for instance, if you wanted to evaluate trends with respect to early decision, financial aid, other things like graduation rates, this is the place to go. And it's pretty easy to create a table through this site as well. Once you get the hang of the site itself, it just basically uploads into an Excel file and allows you to publish institution by year by variable.
So we're not going to go through all of that, but like Andrew said, take some time, get familiar with it. I will say that the iPads data center, the folks that run this, they are extremely responsive. So anytime you run into an issue or if you have a question, you can actually put in like a ticket request with them, and they typically respond within 24 hours, which some things with the federal government take a little bit longer, but this has been one of those things that they are pretty responsive with it, which is great. So check that out. The last thing I kind of wanted to run through in terms of data is sort of this one-stop shop that we've created over 10 plus years of sort of figuring out, well, it kind of started with us just posting very bare bones minimum admissions data, like entering class statistics, for example, which is still a pretty popular page on the site. But it's morphed into other things that we just thought, well, what's going to be useful for families and counselors? And that has just blossomed into this extensive array of tables and lists. On our site, we've even created top colleges for various different programs. So 75 plus different academic programs that are out there. We tend to add a handful every other year or so. So this is a great source, again, free for you to kind of go through, find the data that you need. We tend to pull this directly from common data sets. So it is very easy to access this sort of all in one place. And then you can see some of the more tables that we've created from our own data collection over time. So that would include things like top feeders for different, desirable professions, business school, engineering, law school, med school, et cetera. So you can click those, take a view of that data, See all these different things for extracurricular activities for students, programs, summer programs for students, small colleges with strong CS offerings, engineering programs, great business offerings as well, and so on and so forth. So check this out, bookmark it. It's just, if you Google college transitions Dataverse, it will come up. And I will say that oftentimes, going back to what I said earlier at the intro, we do get a lot of ideas and suggestions from counselors like yourself. In fact, I remember having a conversation with Renee and some of her colleagues about schools that they wanted to know with high percentages of Jewish populations, especially in today's age where there's been a lot of controversial comments by public figures. There's a lot of families and students that are mindful of this, and they want to go to an institution where they feel supported. And so we've created a list actually where colleges that have very strong offerings for Jewish students, Jewish populations. And so that's an idea that just came out of having a conversation around the table. So if you guys have ideas, if you see things that pop into your mind, shoot us an email. We're happy to take a look at it and let you know if that's something that we can do or possibly put on the docket for the future.
Yeah. And one additional comment, plug, just whereas most sites allow you only to search by institution, our site allows you to search by variable. So for example, if you wanted to search merit aid figures by institution, in other words, a list of merit aid figures across institutions within one particular variable, our site allows you to do that. If you wanted to search entering class statistics by institution, our site allows you to do that as well, so on and so forth. So it might be just a different kind of site that you can refer to when you need to look at institutions by variable and not just at one institution itself.
It typically loads a little faster. It's just because I'm sharing my screen. But yeah, check this out. Like I said, like Andrew said, it's free. There's a lot of information there. We're constantly adding to it. It will be somewhat revamped over the course of next year as we kind of do a site refresh, but the information, the content will very much stay the same. All right, so that's kind of the big data sources that we wanted to point out for you. And then if you have any questions about this, once we get to the kind of Q&A part of this, we're happy to field those for you as well. In terms of admission trends that we're following, and I'll just we can actually click over to pull this in real quick. Early admission deadlines. So I know many of you are very somewhat relaxed right now because you're able to take some time at post November 1 and November 15th. We've got past early action and early decision for a lot of schools. So take some time to relax. Those of you in college admissions offices, you've been slammed. So we understand, and you're going to be busy for the next several months. But we have noticed with institutions like Allee, I know you're at UNC with an October 15th early action deadline. Clemson had an early action deadline of October 15th, which changed from November 1 in prior years. There's even been institutions like Georgia Tech that have been inundated with applications over the last few years. Georgia Tech is amazing to me because back in 2010, they accepted about 66% of all applicants, and now they're one of the most selective public institutions in the entire country, driven in large part by what we're noticing with the selectivity, the competitiveness of programs such as computer science and engineering. So as a result of that, not only have they had an early action deadline of October 15th, but they've actually, Rick Clark and his team at Georgia Tech have actually separated early action for in-state versus out-of-state applicants, because they still do, as a public institution, they still do prioritize admission for in-state applicants, but they have a high demand. He'll be the first to tell you that. So I think this year they actually moved it up to October 10th, I believe. I think they extended it for a week for in-state students, so I think they pushed it back to October 17th. But we do notice a trend with very desirable institutions, very selective institutions, of kind of bumping these dates a bit forward. Engineering and business at Texas A&M, for example, that has an October 15th deadline, which is different from some of their other deadlines. So we do expect those kind of trends to continue. As colleges become more selective, more desirable, they may need more time to process applications. So we are going to follow that over the course of the next few years. We do post application deadlines on our site as well, and we hope to continue that. I'll show you a tool where you can get some of that information through our website as well in a moment. With early decision, Andrew, I think you wanted to kind of
Just a note there, I'm sure we've noticed, as I'm sure many of you have, that many colleges are continuing to rely very heavily on early decision, again, in part because of the increasing uncertainty around enrollment and because colleges feel greater pressure to shore up their numbers. In our experience, this has been particularly pronounced at highly selective liberal arts colleges like Davidson, Middlebury, Bates, for example. In recent years, over the past several years, I would say, our students who applied early decision appeared to gain a pretty significant edge at these schools specifically. Several come into the process with slightly lower than average credentials, but still manage to earn an offer. So again, especially at those liberal arts colleges, high selective liberal arts colleges, and then other schools that are slightly outside of that elite tier, places like BU, Northeastern, Santa Clara. These are also schools where we've noticed that type of trend.
Definitely. And with test optional admissions, obviously COVID, there was a growing number of institutions going test optional over the last 10 years, really. Started obviously with small liberal arts colleges, ballooned up quite substantially with some public institutions. UChicago was one of the more prominent, selective private institutions that went test optional actually prior to COVID, which certainly created a lot of headlines. But then when COVID happened, everybody almost was forced into going test optional. There's been a few schools going back to requiring test scores. You noticed, actually, amazingly, all public institutions in Florida stayed test optional, or excuse me, test required throughout COVID, which was very controversial. Put a lot of pressure on applicants and families, but they remained committed to test scores. Georgia went test optional for about a year. Most of the public institutions in Georgia have, the Board of Regents has granted those institutions the ability to stay test optional. But there are a few schools, namely the most selective ones like Georgia Tech, UGA, and Georgia College and Milledgeville that do require test scores. So that no longer counts for students who are trying to apply without submitting test scores. They in fact have to. But there have been other institutions that have gone back to requiring test scores as well. But for the most part, most colleges have stayed test optional and have said that they remain committed to that going forward because there has been somewhat of a benefit to institutions. They've received applications from a diverse applicant pool. Their application totals have gone up. So that's never a bad thing for business. And there's been other things that have been, positive outcomes that have occurred with test optional admissions. But for some schools, it may be a name only. And I know, Andrew, you wanted to kind of talk about that.
Just test optional doesn't always mean test blind. So we have noticed a swing back toward advantaging students with higher test scores, particularly at elite schools like those within the Ivy League. Other highly competitive, even larger schools that typically adopt a more formula-driven admissions process. Two schools in particular that really stood out to us over this past cycle were University of Michigan and University of Wisconsin-Madison. Because we work with a relatively large number of high-achieving applicants every year, about 300 in total, we're able to kind of compare admission outcomes between students with very strong grades and test scores to students with equally impressive grades, but who did not possess strong test scores. And the differences we discovered were pretty stark. Specifically, students possessing higher test scores earned admission into both elite and some of these larger institutions that I just mentioned at a pretty higher rate. So based on some of the data we're now seeing, we're advising students to still devote significant time to test prep if they're able, while at the same time, again, emphasizing that test optional doesn't always mean test blind.
Right. And then in terms of competitive admissions at top institutions, as we mentioned earlier, COVID really accelerated a lot of things for a lot of institutions. You guys, I know so many of you followed this stuff quite closely, but one institution in particular that sort of blew our mind this past year was Northeastern in Boston. Because anytime you go from an acceptance rate that's 20+%, which was already very low for Northeastern compared to some of the other institutions in the Northeast, to single digit 7% acceptance rate, that raises eyebrows. And so, again, driven in large part by test optional admissions and people sort of throwing their hat in the ring, students, applicants throwing their hat in the ring in the institutions. We expect that to continue. I think institutions that are ranked in US News top 50 are only going to become more desirable over time. But I will also qualify this by saying the majority of institutions out there accept the majority of applicants. We're talking about a very, very small sliver of the institutions, boarding institutions that are out there. In North Carolina, institutions like Chapel Hill, they serve the public in North Carolina, and majority of applicants who are admitted come from North Carolina. But other institutions that have become very selective in the state, Duke is, as Andrew can tell you, it's more selective than half the Ivies now. Acceptance rate there fluctuates between 4% and 5%. No shortage of applicants from outside of North Carolina and in North Carolina apply to Duke each year. Davidson College, probably the most selective liberal arts school in the Southeast, will only continue to draw applicants from across the country. But there are other great schools in the Southeast that admit well over 50% of applicants, and that will be there for students. And so, what we try to do, and I think you'll see this in the information that we post on our site, through our blog, through the Dataverse, through the books that we publish, is we want to make students and families aware of the incredible opportunities in schools that are out there that maybe don't get as much recognition as they deserve. Okay, so that would be a school like Elon, North Carolina, which has kind of been a regional institution for a long time, but that brand is growing. When families find out about the outcomes of the institutions, what they're doing for students who are currently enrolled, how they're helping them prepare for their career or graduate school, I think that's when the message starts to get out and you see more applicants applying. But there are a lot of good schools that are out there. And so, but as far as those top institutions, we only expect that to continue in terms of how selective, how competitive they are. One of the things I did want to note is major choice and impact on college admissions. Many of you that work with students, you may have noticed this over the course of the past year, going back to what I said earlier with a school like Georgia Tech. Engineering, computer science, without a doubt, computer science is the most competitive major at the majority of selective institutions across the country, without a doubt. It is, what we're noticing is quite honestly, it's shocking. And I want to credit Andy Borst and his admissions team at UIUC, because we are the biggest proponents of transparency in college admissions you'll ever find. And he has listened to the demands of folks who are asking, what does it mean to apply to various programs at your school? And so if you go to his admissions webpage, the admissions webpage for UIUC, you're going to see the breakdown. You're going to see the total admission rate, first choice admission rate for your major, the various schools programs, and how those admission rates stack up. So you can already notice some differences between these. College of Engineering, no surprise, that's the lowest. But let's scroll down and let's look at computer science programs. All right, so UIUC total admission rate approaches 45%. But when we get down into computer science, we notice single digits. If we do some of the special CS plus X programs, which are unique to UIUC, it's a bit higher. But that just goes to show you, if you are a student, and this is why you can't necessarily look at just general admission rates and say, you know what, I'm going to get in general test scores and GPA and those things, because you may not know how competitive certain schools and programs are within institutions. And we notice this at UIUC, University of Michigan, with schools like Ross, like in business there, for example, Cockrell, and in some of the other schools at University of Texas, Austin, et cetera. This happens all over the country. And so for those students who are really trying to tackle some of these STEM fields that are so competitive, they need to be mindful of that, and they need to have options. And so that's why we always tell students and families, make sure you have a really good option in state that, your chances of admission are favorable, but also one that you can afford, because there's so many. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, it's important to set expectations. A lot of students that we work with come into the process thinking that a school like UIUC is a safety for them, or at the very least a target when they're going to CS. We have to tell them that we have students that we work with that get into Penn, Cornell, Brown, Columbia, that do not get into UIUC for computer science. The same could be said for Purdue, for some of these other schools that are very reputable, but not as selective overall as some of the more elite institutions. So it's important to set those expectations early so that at the end of this cycle, students really have a good array of options from which to choose.
Right. And then there are some schools, once you get down into learning more about different institutions, you'll notice, and these things can change too from year to year. For example, NYU used to allow students to indicate 3 different majors on the application. Now they only allow 1, because a lot of students are trying to game it a little bit and say, well, I'll indicate this, but I really want to try to transfer into STEM, or I want to try to transfer into engineering. Some schools have kind of cut that out a bit because, you know, they have years of data to speak to what was happening. There are other schools that allow for students to move pretty freely between majors. And one of the variables that we've sort of created, and you can find within our book, College is Worth Your Money, I'll point that out in a bit, is curricular flexibility and the ease at which some students can sort of move between majors, because that still can very much occur at certain institutions. But there are some colleges that, you know, especially like the UCs, for example, if you want to go into engineering, you really need to apply as an engineering major, because otherwise, if you enroll in something like, you know, English, for example, and you try to then change your major in engineering, it can be incredibly difficult, borderline impossible to do. And so, you know, we want students and families to know this information as well.
We have tables on our Dataverse specifically devoted to engineering, computer science, and business. So Michael's showing you right there, and this will to changing your major to business, computer science, or engineering. And these tables will show you by institution, you know, the extent to which it is possible to move into those majors after enrolling. So that can guide your college planning, but also your planning with respect to what you might indicate as your first choice major on an application. For example, at Georgia Tech, you get 1 unrestricted change of major. So if you're equally enthusiastic about economics and computer science, in order to maybe gain a bit of an edge, you might indicate economics, knowing full well that after enrolling at Tech, if you wanted to move into a computer science major, you'd be able to do so quite easily.
All right, and then another thing that we wanted to touch upon is growing wait lists and sort of what we've noticed over the last couple of years with that.
Yeah, so wait lists have grown incredibly long, as I'm sure many of you have noticed. The financial impacts of COVID and the fact that students are applying to more schools has just injected more uncertainty into the admissions process. And really, in an effort to shore up adequate enrollment, colleges and universities, even highly selective ones, are relying on their wait lists, it seems, more and more. In our case, the sheer number of waitlist offers to our students has been pretty alarming over the past couple of years, especially knowing that most offers were never going to result in admission. Just a couple examples. We noticed this last round, which we're actually going to post to our site this week, to our waitlist table. Cornell offered waitlist spots to nearly 8,000 students and ultimately accepted only 24. UC San Diego offered more than 25,000 waitlist spots, accepting 0 students from their waitlist. So at some institutions, a waitlist offer doesn't always mean what it used to.
Yeah. And then what we've noticed with international applicants. So, you know, the prior administration, presidential administration, sort of did some things that made it not as inviting for international applicants, and COVID really cut down on that too. And so, you know, those numbers, and this is public knowledge, if you go out there and look on inside higher ed, you see a lot of institutions really relied on a pretty robust, healthy number of international applicants and students attending each year to meet their, you know, financial obligations. Well, all of a sudden overnight with COVID, especially, and some other things that were occurring simultaneously, those numbers dropped drastically. And so, but that's starting to come back. And so as a result of that, we've noticed that certain colleges are really starting to relax some admission standards to try to get international students back in the door. So we're starting to notice some of that coming back as well.
Yeah.
And then last thing I wanted to kind of point out is on our website, and if you go back to kind of the top navigation bar, you're going to see what's called College Investigator. This is a tool that we developed about 1.5 years ago after about 12 months of work. And currently there's about 400 institutions in here, and you can search by various variables and then export sort of a custom CSV file, excuse me, based on the institutions and variables that you select. And so if just go here, play around with it, select your variables, select your institutions, export a CSV rather, and then you can have sort of a custom data file that you can share with colleagues, share with students, etc. If you look here on the right, there's kind of a guide on how you can do this. And we have a nice fancy video with Andrew there that will kind of walk you through and share the screen with you as well. Again, this is a free resource as well. We don't charge anything for this. This is there for you. We put a lot of time and energy and resources into making this. We want people to use it, so it's there for you. So check that out when you get a chance. And then, as I mentioned, we do have an annual college guide that we put out each year. It's called College is Worth Your Money. It currently has 200 colleges in there. We started with the first edition 3 years ago. It had 150 schools. We bumped it up to 175 in the second edition. It will stay at 200 for the foreseeable future just because of some publisher restrictions and limitations on page count. But we also fought with our publisher and agreed to leave this at $19.99. I can't promise it'll always stay there, but it's pretty affordable. And I think when you open the book and sort of compare it to maybe some of the other college guides that you commonly use, I hope you're pleasantly surprised by what you find in terms of data in the profiles that we've written for those institutions. So check that out. But again, a lot of that information, especially on the data side, is available for free at the Dataverse within our website. So those are the big things that we wanted to share. And then now, if it's okay with you guys, I thought we would just kind of open it up for Q&A and field your questions.
I think someone just asked if you could share some links in the chat. If you want to share the link to the Dataverse.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
It's been interesting looking into, I'm thinking about how I see all of these things happening at UNC Chapel Hill and how much has changed in the 8 years that I've been here. So really interesting to think about. But yeah, anybody, I think feel free to submit questions in the chat.
And did Andrew say Cornell offered 800 or 8,000?
Yeah, 8,000. Yeah, I direct message Kim. So
okay,
thanks for that.
All right. And then Lauren, thank you for the comment on the book. Really appreciate that.
Honestly, for those of you who have not used the Dataverse, I use it daily. I admit, I'm kind of addicted to it. So whenever anybody asks me a question, I just go to Dataverse first. Then if I can't find it, I'll start doing other research. But they've done a thorough job of kind of thinking of all the questions that counselors get, because we get them a lot.
And as Michael said, any ideas that you have, please feel free to email us, Andrew at collegetransitions.com, Michael at collegetransitions.com. That's really what this page is about, incorporating some of your ideas, some of the things that you might need, and then we can go ahead and collect that data for you.
Yeah, one of the pages that we're actually going to post by this Friday, it's been on my list for a few weeks, has been self-reported academic record. And I see a lot of counselors sort of moaning with that. Yeah, this is if you're not familiar with it, self-reported academic record is typically required by some schools where you go in, the applicant goes in and has to confirm the courses and grades that they've earned in high school. There are about 40 institutions that require that. And so we're going to create a table with a list of those institutions and the link to their SRAR policy. It's relatively new. It's not that old. It's not that commonplace, obviously, for most institutions, but it is a requirement out there for some. And Clemson they kind of boggled things a bit this year because they required the SRAR at the same date in which the early application was due. Unfortunately, they may not send that login instructions to their applicant portal where students could then link to their SRAR until about 24 to 48 hours after students have submitted the application. Well, that was problematic for the majority of applicants who tend to wait to the last day to submit their application, right? So they were inundated with phone calls, us being one of them. So we've gone ahead and tried to create a table just to make this information available for students and families and counselors.
Yeah, and to Deb's, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just the first question in the chat was just about where would you direct someone on the Dataverse if they had questions about financial aid information?
Yeah, so there is a whole financial section within the Dataverse. There's data related to merit aid, so the average merit award given at institutions, as well as the percentage of students who receive those merit awards. There's also average grants by institutions, selective scholarships offered at various institutions. There's a whole wealth of financial aid related data on the site. Again, if you guys have any questions after looking through those tables, just let us know.
Yeah. And then Dan had a question about what are your thoughts about the increasing complexity of applications, including students recreating their transcripts for schools, hidden essays on portals, additional supplements, the things that we've noticed have been optional videos, optional interviews. There's a lot of hoops to jump through for some of the institutions. I think one of the big worries that Andrew, myself, and Dave, our other partner, have is that for certain students, they can handle this. There's a lot of students out there that can't. And there's a lot of students that don't even know about this stuff. And so that's where our big concern is what are the equity issues involved? Particularly as it relates to some of that optional information that some students just may not have the ability to submit or the preparedness to be able to submit those things. So yeah, it's a growing challenge. Don't have all the answers, unfortunately, but we have noticed that some institutions, it seems they've been making some applicants jump through a few more hoops.
Yeah. And Deb also mentioned, and the idea that nothing is truly optional can be true, especially with respect to essays. We have noticed that allowances are made to certain students coming from different demographics. So some of the pro bono work that we do, if you are, low income or otherwise underrepresented student, maybe it isn't as essential to go and visit campus or to submit that optional video. If you're a more affluent applicant coming from a more savvy high school, those things can become a factor. So I think it's different standards for different types of applicants.
Yeah, one of the good things I think from the admissions side of things that has come out of COVID has been the option, or I wouldn't say optional, but the virtual opportunities that are offered to students, whether it be a campus kind of visit, presentation, students can register for that. These are things that institutions maybe didn't have as much desire or the ability to create in the past, but when tours were shut down, they kind of were forced to do that. And I think a lot of institutions will keep continuing doing those things, offering those things going forward. And for students, let's say you're in South Florida and you have an interest in University of Rochester in New York, you might not be able to get up to that part of New York to visit, but it's a school that really interests you. So you can take advantage of these virtual engagement opportunities and learn a lot about that school. So those are cool things to see come about. One of the questions from Kathy was, do you already compile a list of colleges that allow self-reported and those that require official scores? In fact, yes, we do. So we do have a standardized testing policy table, and you'll see a column there for official scores required. And then you'll also see a separate table for colleges accepting self-reported test scores. So that's going to be in the applying requirements and important factors section of the database. All right.
That's awesome. Well, we have about 3 minutes left, so to be respectful of everybody's time, if there's any last questions, I think there's one that just came in. You see that, Michael?
Yeah.
Have you seen a reduction of merit-based financial aid awards due to students not submitting scores? Anecdotally, I mean, I don't think we have enough data to really, say this is actually the case, but anecdotally, in our experience, we do see students who choose to submit test results and who have high test results earn merit aid just in greater amounts than students who have the same grades but not high test scores. That goes back to our point earlier that test optional isn't always test blind. There are some schools out there that are pretty transparent about, yes, you do need test scores to qualify for merit, and there are others that truly do evaluate students on the basis of just their transcript. But overall, we are seeing that, yes, those high scores do yield advantage.
Okay, well, I want to take the opportunity just to thank all of our guest speakers, Michael and Andrew for sure, and all of our committee updaters. We really appreciate the participation. I think we had a lot of people here, and I hope that it was informative to everybody. And if there's any questions going forward, I know Michael and Andrew said that you can email them. You can definitely email Allie and I, or any of the committee chairs. They on the presentation that'll be shared out. It's being recorded, so we'll send it out, I hope, by the end of the week. you'll see everybody's email address, and also everything is on the SACAC website. So if there's any other last minute questions, otherwise, I thank you very much. Allie,
Yeah,
thank you for being
Renee.
thank you for being my co-chair. Thank you for everybody for participating. And Michael and Andrew, thanks for making the time to come today. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.